Hello everyone, it's the storyteller here. I've prepared something slow, eerie, and sleep-friendly for you tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Are you drifting off already, or still wide awake? The exodus of the corporate zombies. I harbor a secret fantasy that the lot of us are undead zombies. Shuffling corpses, slavish, insentient lumps of meat, navigating the public transportation system by reflex, devoid of any signs of higher-level cognitive function. I am waiting on a train platform to board the Long Island Railroad. The platform of Riverhead Station is indistinguishable from the platforms of any of the multitude of other trains run by the Metropolitan Transit Authority. The branching arteries all lead back to the beating heart. New York, New York. The Big Apple. The sunshine is what really gets me down. Those brief moments in the sun are the most depressing part of my day. Before I board my metal coffin and descend into the bowels of the subterranean tunnels that lead back to the source. Boarding the train, we all nod to one another. There is Caitlin. She is wearing a sleek pantsuit, pale as an unbasted Christmas turkey. There is Vinny. He has quit smoking. He gnaws on a smoking cessation chew stick. Caitlin takes her usual seat, clicks open her laptop immediately, and responds to an email. It's 6:19 a.m., and I'm working, she says to her superiors. Vinny is a cell phone guy. He calls some labor union flunky and barks some pointless orders to let the men know he's awake and he's watching. There's Brandon. He is a Wall Street Journal guy, a reader. He opens that paper wide. In the seat next to me, his elbows brush my shoulder, and that infernal paper smells like paper mâche and peat moss, pulpy ammonia, and sulfite. Smells like hell. I get off at Grand Central Terminal Madison and exit through the bowels of the city. Bodies flow out of the trains when the doors open, like the gates of navigation dams, allowing water to flow down through canals to the next elevation. The corpus of the flowing bodies splits at little tributaries, some leading to the surface, where I am headed, others lower, deeper into the subterranean dungeon. I walk north from 47th Street to 53rd Street on Lexington Avenue. I blend in and amid a stopping and starting throng of mindless streetwalkers that navigate communally like a school of fish or a flock of birds. We split at a street crossing with an Uber that didn't make the turn and is blocking pedestrian traffic, blocking the box. Then we swerve en masse around a homeless man sleeping on a cardboard box in the middle of the sidewalk, with a hat by his feet and a sign saying, "Homeless, humiliated veteran, please help." We do all of this mindlessly in comatose prisons, our unremitting corpses dragging us along, our thoughts are closed off by the virus in a faraway chamber, unreachable and fortified. No one speaks to one another. We walk in silence, heads lowered, zombified bodies still donning the starched and pressed suits of the living. Pallid faces are directed away from the searing sunshine. We are still draped in living, breathing skin that gives the appearance of life. I arrive at my building. I walk through the gray-streaked white marble lobby with a matching gray-streaked white marble reception desk, flash my badge, and place it on the turnstile into the building. I take the elevator down to the basement level. I stare blankly ahead with the feeling that the whole world is asleep. I walk into the dingy maintenance office suite, a shut-up room with pumped-in air, and I am back in another subterranean dungeon, away from the things of man. "Hey, duct tape," Greg says, nodding. Greg has thick-framed, high-prescription glasses and an unassuming brown suit. He is a heavily balding, 40-something, Clark Kent-looking guy with paler skin and a bit of a gut. "Hi, Sam," Gina says with a smile. She is about 30 and single, and wearing a floral blouse over a casual jean skirt, clear leggings, and pumps. Gina has flowing black hair and dark eyebrows. She has a little rouge on her face and dark carmine lipstick. Gina smells like fresh laundry, with a spritz of lily flowers, waxy, light, and verdant. I can taste her on my tongue like a fruity Jolly Rancher candy. Back when I was still living, I crushed on her hard. "Morning," I say. The placard on my desk reads, "Facilities Maintenance Specialist." I report to the facilities operations manager, Jeremy. It is quite possibly the most useless job of all time. I can hear Mike Rowe's voice on a useless jobs special describing the stupidity of this position in vivid detail. Jeremy also sits in the same room as Greg, Gina, and I. Because why not house multiple levels of redundant management, literally right on top of one another? That isn't a rhetorical question. It is a statement I made once that cost me another job. Jeremy is on a Zoom call about a pesky HVAC issue with the 40-ton AC unit and chiller. This seems to confirm my suspicion that we are undead creatures, with ventilation just as stagnant as that offered to Subway. Rats. Jeremy is a dusty, square man who moves in a choppy claymation manner, like a character in a Gumby cartoon. "Yeah, but the water loop." "Right, Larry. How do we make sure it reaches the lower floors?" "I didn't ask you that, Larry." "So, it's the chiller?" "Right, Larry. The chiller, then?" "I didn't ask you that, Larry." "And Bob, how many men will it take? What is it gonna cost us? Put in the requisition." "Larry, we need to get his going, Larry. This isn't gonna be a problem now, is it, Larry?" "Today, We both approach the same old-fashioned coffee pot at the same time. The one with the burnt-in brown crust on the bottom from warming stale coffee too long without the burner being turned off. These have gone out of style, but are still seen these days in the waiting area of every dingy car mechanic's shop. I wait for Jeremy to get his cup and then fix mine. I add in the processed Coffee Mate fake creamer and add some stevia fake sweetener to taste. Staring down at the putrid brown coffee in the styrofoam cup under the unnatural overhead lights in the subterranean room full of pumped-in air, with the Coffee Mate clumping up into little floaters as I stir, I am certain that no living creature would take part in such a deadening ritual. The coffee tastes like arsenic. The overhead lights penetrate my skull and char my brain, which caramelizes into brown residue, like the stain on the bottom of the coffee pot. The stilted silence is intermittently interrupted by phones ringing on the floor. It reminds me of the secure unit of a nearby Bellevue sanitarium, in which invisible orderlies stand ready with concealed blackjacks and expandable riot sticks in their coats, all for the too frequently needed crisis intervention. My job is to maintain the look and feel of the facilities and ensure a comfortable and high-quality environment. I have no knowledge of plumbing, electrical, or carpentry, but I decide when specialists in these areas are needed to fix a problem. I have no knowledge of snow removal, office cleaning, on-site and off-site data storage, supply reorder processing, or furniture and decor, but I specialize in assisting the operations manager with managing all of these tasks. At 4:11 p.m., the role of facilities suddenly becomes temporarily obsolete. The fluorescent lights overhead unceremoniously flicker, hiss angrily, and go dark. So do the computer screens, the phones, everything. The elevators are stuck mid-floor. Trains in subway tunnels slow to an abrupt and jarring stop. It is as if a blood clot has become lodged in the left main artery, cutting off blood flow to the heart. The pulsing beat of the metropolis slows. Do-dump, 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 and then stops. Do. I walk all the way up to the 22nd floor. As I climb the stairs, the sweat coats my chest underneath my white button-down shirt, which begins to seep through. I finally come to the floor where our cohorts in purchasing sit. A little color returns to my face from the climb. There is an old-fashioned table radio on the darkened conference table, streaming out news from 1010 Winds AM radio. Walking in, I scream out, "Bill, Bill, you there, Bill?" "Sam?" he asks. "Bill, what's going on here?" I say. "Blackout, Sammy boy. The whole East Coast is down, and part of Canada, Bill says. What the hell caused it? I ask. They are saying some trees in Ohio brushed against a high power line and overloaded the system, Bill says. How'd you like that? A strong gust of wind and some tree branches have sent us back to the Stone Age. So, it's a vegetation management issue. Human error, I say, walking out into the hallway. I can hear the screams of a woman trapped in an elevator in between floors. She is screaming for help. I take off my shoe and use it to pry open the closed elevator doors. Peering in, I cannot see anything but the black interior of the car from above, where there is a small opening down into the car. "Help! Help!" she screams. "Are you okay?" I ask. "Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. Please get me out of here," she says. "What's your name?" I ask. "I'm Michelle," she says. "And where do you work?" I ask. "On the 59th floor," she says. "Okay. We are going to get this sorted out. Get you out of here. I'll stay and talk to you for a few minutes until someone comes. Why don't you tell me what is going on with you? I'm so scared. I want to check in on my daughter, but I don't know what is going on," Michelle says. "I don't know either. The lights, the electricity, it all just died," I tell her. "Someone said it is a power grid failure. Some trees downed a high power line, and it overloaded the system. My God," she says. "It is so dark in here. And I think of how dark the bleached corridors and office suites are, but in a different way. A firefighter comes running up the staircase I just exited from. He stands at attention, like a superhero in a comic book. Larger than life. Totally calm. In command. Assured. He must be one of the last of the living. "Someone's here, a fireman," I say. Even though it is summer, he is wearing the traditional tan top coat with reflective taping, the fire hat, and is holding a crowbar and a hatchet in his enormous left hand. He is a big fellow of at least 6'4", strapping. He pushes me to the side, reaches into the elevator, clasps the woman's arm, and pulls her out in one yanking pull. She scuffles her feet as she finds footing on solid ground. I give Michelle a hug. She cries on my shoulder and says, "My darling Rebecca, I don't know how to find her. People are walking home, walking the streets," I say. "Just walk with them. I'm sure she's doing the same." I head back down the stairs to the maintenance room. Arriving in the maintenance room, I see Gina chewing on the end of her pen and tapping her left foot nervously. Her eyes are wide and inviting, and I feel a thumping in my chest. Can't be, I think. A sign of life? "Where have you been?" she asks. "I went up to purchasing to see if anyone knew anything," I say. "And fucking left me down here with Greg?" she asks. "I'm sorry. I needed to check things out," I tell her. "What do we do now?" she asks. "I can't get back to Riverhead tonight." If you want, I can come and stay with you. Walk back, keep you company. My heart is echoing in my chest. I can feel the warm blood in my ears. It is almost as if I am a living creature, still endowed with a life force and a will of my own. You'd do that? She asks. Would I do that? I think. Are you kidding? Of course I'd do that, in a heartbeat, without question. But I don't want her to know how keen I am on the idea. Sure, I've got to sleep somewhere, I say as casually as I can manage. Gina and I walk down Lexington Avenue in silence at first, taking in the sights and sounds of this once-in-a-lifetime moment. The daywalkers are shuffling along in abject confusion. The dislocated bodies rattle, bone on bone. The breathless friction of the arthritic joints, gritting from lack of use. They all look blankly forward at the footfalls of the other daywalkers. A bawdry display of sudden clemency. Inmates freed from captivity, grumbling at the loss of their comfortable bondage, their predictable harlotry, and now they are cast asunder into a concrete desert, wandering, listless and free. But free to do what? And free to go where? Some of the more recently dead voice words of encouragement. We're gonna make it out of here, all of us, together. We're New Yorkers. Some others ask, where shall we go? And yet others speculate. There will be shelters set up when we get back out of Manhattan. The strange thing, the thing I can't wrap my head around, is that everyone, by some internal navigation system, automatically is fleeing the city, the beating heart of the metropolis. No one wants to stay in Manhattan overnight, not even the ones that live here. Does anyone live here? Is it even a real place? It seems now to be a work camp, a prison to be escaped, a liminal space that can't be lived in. An Alcatraz made of bricks and mortar and steel and marble. The parade of the undead proceeds forward with unexpected charity and unity, even if it is lacking entirely in life. The bodega clerks are out in the streets, handing out Poland spring waters and plates of food that will spoil. There are police at intersections, directing traffic, furiously screaming and waving their hands to stop cars from crashing without traffic signals. There are buses taking folks out to Long Island. The blazing late afternoon sun burns with a surreal intensity. A full day of baking turns the pavement hot and causes waves of heat to radiate up from the road base. The buildings sit like impotent ruins of a bygone age, dark and useless relics. And for the life of me, I can't understand their use or purpose, which suddenly seems so strange. That all these people would travel from places too far to reach on foot. Travel for hours, each day. For what? To assemble in these ghastly concrete prisons like inmates, to have their lives consumed by a machine of consumerism that eats its own young? For what? As we get into Murray Hill, we turn left on 32nd Street, everyone going the same way. We are all headed to Brooklyn. What an adventure, Gina says. And I remember that time I took her to Mets Stadium because I had extra tickets to a Dave Matthews show. I remember how she hit my arm when the opening band was playing. It had been August then, too. We'd hit each other with playful jabs like school children, back and forth, all night. We'd gotten really carried away with it. So much so that we both had armfuls of bruises the next day. The tension of what we both really wanted to do had been palpable, but neither of us had the courage to act on it. We turn again at Kips Bay, overlooking the FDR, and head south toward the Brooklyn Bridge. Where do you live in Brooklyn? I ask. Oh, just down in the Heights, near the courthouse, over on Remsen Street, she says. We continue walking as the crowd of the undead thickens into a veritable street mob, clogging 2nd Avenue, so tight with people we are fit to bursting. I put my arm on Gina's shoulder and hold her close, keeping her next to me. That feels nice, she says. I don't want to lose you in this mess, I say. In time, we come to the Brooklyn Bridge. It is a crazy spectacle. The bridge is swaying from the foot traffic. It is jammed from one side to the other, with people crossing on foot. There are helicopters overhead, filming the exodus. The mood has changed, and some of the daywalkers are shaking off their heavy, hebetudinous slumber and waking as if from a dream. Their faces are full of smiles and laughter. I haven't seen such wide-eyed impetuosity outside of a music festival. It is like the Dave Matthews concert I'd went to with Gina. They all seem happy, hopeful, alive. As we arrive at Gina's 7th floor walk-up, a dingy place, she smiles and gives me an impromptu kiss on the cheek. She grabs a bottle of Meiomi Pinot Noir and 2 plastic cups, and we head outside where it is cooler. Out in the streets, it is like a festival. We are in a magical realm. People are dancing and singing. Buskers are playing. People are singing along. This is how the city was meant to be. We walk down to O'Keefe's, and we sit down outside and neck like kids in high school. Hey, Sam, she says. Yes, Gina, I say. Don't leave me, she says. I smile. And at that moment, I know that I am never returning to that office building again. My undead body finally shakes off the curse. Do I remember how to live? The gingerbread cookies. The gingerbread cookies. Let's go downstairs and bake some cookies like Mother used to make. The warm smell sits right at home in your nostrils, invading them like wild axe murderers, hacking and slashing their way through endless miles of human bodies that stand in the way of their inhumane, carnal desires. Shh, but that's too dark. It's Christmas, after all. So let's go downstairs and bake some cookies, like Mother used to make. One step, then two. Ooh, isn't this great? You've never baked gingerbread cookies before? Oh no, because you always thought that you would never be able to make them oh so good, like Mother used to. What did she say she made them with? Some kind of special ingredient. What was it? Was it sugar and spice and everything nice? Was it love? That special ingredient that every mother cooks with because you are their extra special little kid? Oh my, this is exciting. Your heart hammers against your rib cage as you set the oven to... Oh, you don't know what to set the oven to. You've never made these before. Probably 300 will be good. You bend down, spin the dial. But what's that? What the heck? There's already a baking tray in there. You take it out, confused. On it, there's a set of perfectly cut gingerbread men. They wear little black tuxedos with white buttons. Their smiles expose endless rows of sharpened, white teeth. And their wide green eyes watch you intently with their white pupils. In the center, one of them stares right at you, holding a folded up note in its tiny dough hand. You snatch it from him, not caring about the little man's feelings. To my little boy, my oh my, I can't believe how the years have passed. It seems like just yesterday that whatever secret deity governs this universe sent me to my untimely punishment beneath the earth's soil. I know, I was always so poetic, right? Now enjoy these cookies. I hope they taste just like how Mommy used to make. Love, Mother. Ding. Apparently, 10 minutes pass while you read that short letter. But to be fair, you don't read it once, do you now? You read it time after time until the words start doing tangos in your head as they spin spiderwebs around one another. Now, after it dings, you're supposed to put the cookies back in and start the baking, Mother said. How hot do you bake them? You asked. Hot, very hot, Mother said. But don't they not like being so hot? Oh, these little guys won't mind at all, Mother said. She slid the tiny men into the 300-degree heat chamber. She smiled. There was really nothing to it. Nothing to it. Well, there's nothing to it, you think, as you slide the baking tray in, and as the minutes tick by, their faces change. No more are the artificial smiles plastered on by a woman who would ruthlessly murder them. Now are the faces of men who know their deaths are coming. Smiles that slowly flatten in the corners as 3 minutes turn to 4, 5 minutes to 6, until the red frosting of their mouths fall clean off, and they can't shout for help. just as you couldn't call the ambulance. When you're there, Mother started clutching her heart and breathing heavily. Minutes after she slid the baking tray filled with small people into the oven for the final time, yelling for you to get the phone, to get up, to do something, and not just sit there as the people cooked in their torture chamber. And then they come alive. One of them pokes its head up, its blank eyes staring into your heart. It's lifeless, dull, unknowing of the infernal fire around it. Like you on that fateful night, not knowing that Mother will soon be gone for good. It looks at you, and then it stands on its two stubby legs, stumbling as it gets up. It walks to the edge of the baking tray, carefully navigating around its still dead, unconscious friends as they lie down, their backs against the aluminum's sun-hot surface. It looks its friends in the eyes, and maybe it thinks, "I'm sorry that I'm here and you're not," and then steps over the edge, falling down into the oven's fiery, incomprehensible bottom. Clunk. "Mother?" You asked, your body shaking all over. Why was she on the ground? Why were her eyes closed? She may have been asleep for all you knew. Maybe she was. Maybe. And then they all stand up. They look like an army, all dressed in their uniform suits. One of them peers down and looks at its friend, all dismembered and burned on the oven's floor. It looks more like charcoal than a body. They form a single file line in the middle of the tray, a gingerbread snake, if you will. And one by one, each of them takes turns taking suicidal leaps off the edge. And one by one, you catch their faces as they take their fateful falls. "Stop crying, kid," they all say. "Mother will be okay." Clunk, clunk, clunk. The gingerbread charcoal pile grows and grows until it is a small mountain. In it, you see a face. Mother. And she smiles the gingerbread smile, looking at you. And you can't tell if it is a smile of relief or a smile of scorn. But it doesn't matter. Your mother's smile is the thing you have always wanted the most. And if this was the way you got it, then so be it. But that smile rang hollow, now devoid of any meaning, any life. An eternal reminder that Mother is gone, and who's to blame for that? And yet, you bake those cookies every year, forgetting that you tried the year before because the waves of memory forces their dark underbellies to recede. And every year, you hope that they taste like how Mother used to make, Elf off the shelf. From the beginning, there had only ever been one rule: don't let anyone see you move. But after what I saw tonight, I was afraid I was going to have to break that rule. The Duncans' house was full of people. From inside Mrs. Mitchell's purse, I carefully peeked out through the open zipper and saw dozens of recognizable faces. People who had come over to pick up Oliver and Squires' friends over the years. They were all laughing and eating and drinking merrily, despite Christmas having already passed. This I knew, because Mrs. Mitchell had already put me away for the season, which made it even more exciting when she had come back to retrieve me again so soon. Everyone was dressed festively in gold, green, and red. The Christmas tree was still brightly shining, and stockings still hung on the mantel above a lit fireplace. Jingle tunes buzzed across the room, and the smell of spiced cider simmered about as I scanned the festive room, delighting in all its magic. I spotted a familiar face, but it was not just any face. No, this face looked quite like mine, so much like mine. In fact, I was certain it was mine. But was it possible another one of us had been granted access to such an exclusive event after Christmas? What were the odds? It took all my training and discipline, much like the effort I'd put forth when Mr. Mitchell accidentally dropped me in the toilet a few years back, not to call out and wave to my North Pole brother. Our mission had always been deemed a solo one. We'd known from the start that once we were sent off, it would be unlikely for us to see another of our kind again. Instead of calling out, I admired my fellow soldier for his composure and his stillness. His Mr. and Mrs. had him out for all to see. Not that we weren't used to being put on display. That was a rather big part of our job. But never had any of us, so I'd thought, been brought to an event like this. I imagined he was as gleeful and giddy about the whole thing as I was, but from where I watched, you'd never be able to tell. The sign of a strong soldier, indeed. Suddenly, a loud clinking sound echoed through the room. With a tap, tap, tap of his glass, Mr. Duncan had silenced the bustling crowd. "Good evening, everyone. I'm so delighted you're all here," he bellowed. "I'm pleased to welcome you to our 3rd annual Elf Off the Shelf ceremony, where we, dedicated and loving parents, get to liberate ourselves from this torturous and time-consuming holiday tradition, now that our children have outgrown their childish beliefs in the magic of Christmas." A loud cheer erupted across the room, but I didn't understand what they were cheering about. Liberate themselves? What holiday tradition? Tonight, we have 2 families who will be liberated: the Halberries and the Mitchells. Please give these lovely couples a congratulatory round of applause for their long years of shelving their elves. Another roar rose across the room, and it was then that I realized why Mrs. Mitchell had brought me here. Suddenly, I felt heavy. Heavier than I felt on the days when Mrs. Mitchell unboxed me, having grown stiff after months of storage. Heavier than Mr. Mitchell when he accidentally sat on me. I dropped down below the zipper of the purse, letting the darkness and the realization consume me. They've come to liberate themselves from me. But what did that mean? I heard Mr. Duncan start talking again, so I lifted my head up out of the zipper. Would either of you like to go first? Mr. Duncan stared toward Sarah Halberry on the other side of the room, and just as he was about to look in my direction, Sarah cried out, "I would!" Her hand was raised and flailing. Her enthusiasm stung, and I hoped Mrs. Mitchell would not be so thrilled to part from me. Surely, she wouldn't be, right? I snuck a peek at her face, but it was unreadable. Her eyes were glued on Sarah, who clutched my twin, Polly, between her fingers. Still, he did not flinch. What are they going to do with him? Chuckling at her enthusiasm, Mr. Duncan said, "Well, come on up here, darling. Bring old Polly with you for everyone to see." With Sarah now at Mr. Duncan's side, he began, "Well, Sarah, I can tell you're excited to get on with it. But we've got a few things to get through before we say goodbye to little Polly. Tell us, you dedicated how many years to this little guy? 17 years?" Now, Sarah was holding Polly displayed on the palm of her hand, oscillating her arm from left to right to show the whole room his face. "Whoa, 17 years? You must have started right when these little guys came out, huh?" Sarah nodded proudly, but her eyes seemed to say something darker, nearly bulging out of her head. "I sure did." "Well, that's just fantastic. Really, really fantastic. So, let's see here. Can you tell me one of your favorite memories with Polly?" Mr. Duncan asked. My favorite memory." Sarah stopped turning and pulled Polly closer to herself, inspecting him. I noticed her face soften as her memory scanned the past, and I couldn't help think about my own favorite memory with the Mitchells, remembering the time she moved me into the fridge. It had been a cold night in there, but when Oliver found me in the morning, clutching an empty pickle jar, his childish giggles warmed me right up. And when he and Skylar told Mrs. Mitchell that I'd climbed into the fridge and ate all the pickles, Mrs. Mitchell pretended she knew nothing about it. That was the moment I fell in love with the Mitchell family. And that was why I was having such a hard time understanding why the Mitchells were planning to get rid of me. We were part of their families, didn't they? See that? I guess it would have to be the time I wrapped one of his legs with tissue paper and wrote a little sign next to him that said, "In recovery. I'll be healed in 3 days." Ugh, it was such a relief not to have to move him for half a week. The room exploded, with more applause and cheering. I'd remembered when Mrs. Mitchell had done something similar, setting me up on a small towel underneath a houseplant. Her note had said that I was on a vacation, and that I'd be back the next day. I'd appreciated the break. Having to hold still in all sorts of poses around the house is not exactly easy. But I'd thought she was doing it to relieve me. A kind reward for all my hard work. Very creative, Sarah. And those of us who are still shelving our elves certainly have a lot to learn from your innovative ideas, don't we? Now, care to indulge us in your worst memory with Polly? We like to end on a bad note, as it tends to make the final goodbye a little easier. Mr. Duncan chuckled. Something about the way he said final goodbye made me uncomfortable, and Mrs. Halberry's sinister smile only made me feel worse. The worst memory with Polly? I watched as she squeezed Polly in her hands, and it felt as if I were the one between her tense grip. Now that's easy. The pause in her words held the room nearly silent, save for the crackling of the fire. It was not like the magical silence of stockings waiting to be filled by Santa on Christmas Eve. Rather, it was full of darkness. I couldn't take my eyes off of Mrs. Halberry and poor Polly, so helpless in her hands. And then he wasn't in her hands anymore. I'd barely heard Mrs. Halberry say all of it before I saw Polly soaring in midair towards the fireplace, his smile brightly intact as he was flung into the flames. I watched, speechless, horrified, trembling, as Polly landed amidst the blazing inferno. The fire popped and bloomed as it devoured him, engulfing his hat and body instantly in vicious heat. My eyes begged me to make it stop, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to scream, "No!" and to leap out of Mrs. Mitchell's purse and lunge to Polly's rescue, but I was frozen in my terror. Why was nobody doing anything? Why did nobody stop that wretched Mrs. Halberry? How could they let? That's when the sounds of celebration finally registered. They were cheering. They were whooping and hollering. I peeked a glance at Mrs. Mitchell and almost fainted at the sight of her. She was clapping, smiling even. What was this party of horror? Who was this woman I had dedicated my existence to? This was certainly not the Mrs. Mitchell I knew. This was, "Well done," Mr. Duncan guffawed, patting Mrs. Halberry on the shoulder. "Guess you were too eager to wait for the formalities, huh, Sarah? Feels good, doesn't it?" She was jumping up and down and clapping next to him, a smile as grand as a child's on Christmas morning. Monster. She was a monster. All right, dear. The whole party thanks you for your contribution and your entertainment. Why don't you go join Paul? and we'll invite the Mitchells up here for their liberation, shall we? If my heart had been working, it wasn't anymore. I dropped back into Mrs. Mitchell's purse, unsure if I had the discipline to conceal my terror. Somewhere inside me, I knew the truth, but I couldn't fight my denial from at least trying. Would the Mitchells really kill me? Mrs. Mitchell's hand found me and pulled me from my dark haven. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. Not like how it does on Christmas to assists Santa's impossible task, but like the sensation of fear, where every minute movement and sensation feels important because you're unsure if it will be your last. I had hoped all of it would be revealed as a dream, but as I rose out from the zipper, I saw the same malevolent faces, all of them staring hungrily in my direction. I'd had no context for such evils, had not even fathomed such perversities could exist around Christmas. And yet, there I was, the target of a ruthless and angry mob of parents. Mrs. Mitchell was quicker and peppier than I'd expected her to be, scurrying towards the front of the fireplace, eager for her turn at murderous betrayal. I did the only thing I knew how to do, the only thing I'd been trained to do. I remained still, sitting poised and cheerful in her hands as she showed me off to the pack of wolves like a sliced Christmas ham. This is Skipper. We got him when our oldest was 2.5, so he's been a tradition in our home for nearly 14 years. I was so relieved when Skylar told me she no longer cared for the stupid thing. Gasp. What an awful thing to say. Carla told me about this little ceremony she conjured up a few years ago, and since then, I just couldn't wait for my day to come. A murmur was rising in the crowd when Mr. Mitchell made his way to Mrs. Mitchell's side. He wrapped his arm around her waist and said, "Oh, come on, dear. You're not even a little sad about it. It's the end of an era." People snickered, and Mr. Mitchell's smile grew wide. I recognized his joking tone, but now it felt like pure mockery. It made me wish I'd never forgiven him for leaving me in the bathroom that day. Mrs. Mitchell tilted her head in consideration and placed a hand on Mr. Mitchell's face. "Aw, honey, there's a lot about the kids being little that I'll miss, but this isn't one of them. Maybe if you'd been more helpful." She pinched his cheek, and they both giggled like mischievous beasts plotting their most vile acts. "I helped," Mr. Mitchell defended. This time, it was mostly just the men in the room who laughed. "You moved him twice in 14 years. They were great hiding places?" Mrs. Mitchell scoffed. "The toilet is not what I consider a great place, Sam." "Okay, that time didn't count. I brought him to the bathroom with me and forgot about him. More to my point, you weren't helpful?" Mrs. Mitchell pecked Mr. Mitchell on the lips. "It's okay. I still love you. But you'll forgive me for being a little excited to not have to do this anymore." Mr. Duncan slung an arm around Mrs. Mitchell's shoulder. All right, you two. I can see you're just as eager as Sarah was, so should we get on with it then? We know Skipper's name, and I'm assuming your worst memory with him was this, toilet incident. Is that right, Sam? Are there any good memories with Skipper you care to share before your final goodbye? Lifeless in her hands, I willed her to remember all our good times together. They had to have been real to her. They had to have meant something, the way I know they meant something, not just to me, but to Skylar and Oliver. Remember their little faces, lit up each morning at the surprise of my new location. Remember how happy they were when Thanksgiving ended because they knew I would arrive soon. I'd brought joy to them for 14 years. How was it possible that they could throw me away? Well, there was one thing. Mrs. Mitchell's voice trailed off. I felt her grip loosen slightly, and a sparkle of hope twinkled in my soft, fluff-filled belly as she turned me in her hands to face her. Lifting me up to her eye level, she stared directly into mine, and I saw 1,000 memories swirling around her glistening green eyes. I'd always thought they looked like the most beautiful holiday wreaths in the world. I'd admired them so many times, but this time I begged her to return the favor. Which moment was she remembering now? The time I mowed the lawn? Or the time I built a gingerbread house and ate part of the roof? Whatever point in our past it was, I wondered if it would be enough to change her mind about all of this. Oh, never mind. All of it was just silly, and I'm so relieved to be done with it. Yeah! The crowd cheered, and my heart sank lower than the thermostat at the North Pole. She was really going to go through with it. What was I going to do? I heard Mr. Duncan spouting off more jokes, and I knew I was losing time. If I didn't do anything soon, I was about to be tossed into the fireplace alongside my now molten friend, Polly. Poor Polly. Had he even an inkling of what his fate had in store for him? Had he loved and trusted the Halberries as I had loved and trusted the Mitchells? I had not known him well, but I'd like to believe that if he'd had any idea about what they were going to do to him, he would have done something to stop it, even if it meant breaking the number one rule. I was still gazing into Mrs. Mitchell's eyes when I saw her lips beginning to form the words, "Goodbye." It was then that I decided I wouldn't let this happen. It was then that I broke my stillness. I leaned forward and slapped her across the face. "How dare you?" I huffed, and the sound of my own voice shocked me, for it had been many years since I heard it. I thought we were family, but families don't burn other members of their family, with my voice being so high-pitched and quiet. It took a moment for everyone to realize what was happening. But once they saw Mrs. Mitchell's face, frozen in an expression of horror. The room fell deathly silent. "Skipper?" Mrs. Mitchell breathed, but by then, I was already out of her hands. I jumped up onto the fireplace mantel and raced across it. I grabbed a hold of some tinsel garland and flew myself across the room towards the Christmas tree, grateful that this one still had its star-shaped tree topper. I remembered long, long ago when Santa had warned us that if we'd ever had an emergency, it was the tree toppers that could quickly transport us to safety. The fear that they might catch me fueled my speed, and quickly I climbed through the branches, the ornaments, and the string of lights all the way up to the top, feeling every single malicious eye searing through my back. Once I finally reached the top, I was breathless. I turned to face the room of malevolent demons and realized my fear had been unwarranted. None of them had moved an inch since I'd sprang into action. Every single one of them was frozen, mouth agape, and staring, as petrified as I had been, watching from within Mrs. Mitchell's purse. I even saw Sarah peek towards Polly's ashen remains in the fireplace. I scanned the faces of them all, and when I landed on the Mrs. Mitchell, I narrowed my eyes. "You owe Schuyler and Oliver a jar of pickles," I said. Then I placed my hand on the glistening star atop the Duncan's Christmas tree, and like a sudden stroke of magic, it was I who was finally liberated. 28 sleighs later, above the laughter and Christmas music, the bang against the door came. Thump, thump, thumped. Paul Reyes sighed. He patted his wife's hand and pushed his chair away from the table. "Don't worry, love. I've got this one." Rosemary frowned at him. "But everybody's here. Who could it be?" He stopped. Rose had framed the doorbell with tinsel. You couldn't miss it. It would take a brain-dead person to knock instead of ringing. He shrugged. "Carolers, or something. I'll give 'em a quid and tell 'em to bugger off." A round of laughter rippled around the table. The playlist swapped over to Wham's Last Christmas. Outside in the front hall, the door shuddered again. Thump, thump, thump. It banged hard enough to make the door vibrate in its frame. Annoyance flickered in his mind. The nerve of some of these charity-begging types. He wasn't one to sniff at donations, but give a man ample time to get up. And don't knock his door down like you're the wolf versus the 3 little pigs. He hurried along in his slippers. I'm coming! Hold your horses!" But still, the banging continued. Thump, thump, thump. The little panes of glass at the top of the door vibrated and threatened to shatter. The figure of a man swayed beyond, blurry and dark. Paul gritted his teeth. He'd have some stern words for whoever it was. It didn't matter what good cause they were raising money for. This behavior was downright rude. He slid the chain off and yanked the door open. "Oh, for goodness sake, what's your prob?" The man behind the door barged through, snarling and screeching. He wore a parka coat with its fur-ringed hood raised. It framed his mess of a face. He had blood smeared all across his skin, and his nose was missing. A window shattered somewhere in the back of the house, and a woman shrieked. Paul's stomach dropped, and he screamed. He grappled with the invader and grabbed a hold of his shoulders. "What?" he grunted. "Let go of me." The man clawed at Paul's shirt. He leaned forward and snapped his teeth. His breath was rotten, and he had bits of ragged meat caught between his teeth. He snarled like a wildcat, and his eyes were white, except for tiny pinpricks of blackness in the center. He flinched backwards from the bites. It was almost as if the maniac wanted to bite his nose off, too, as revenge for losing his own. Whatever was wrong with him, drugs, he guessed. He was dangerous, and Paul had to stop him. Paul grabbed the nearest thing from the shelf on the wall, an animatronic snowman. He smacked the madman across the face with it. Jingle Bell Rock played from the crappy speakers, and the snowman started to boogie. Paul hit the man with it again and again. "Get out! Get out!" The man recoiled from each blow of the rubber decoration. He snarled and shrieked, backing away through the front door as Paul struck him. At some point, something mechanical cracked inside the snowman. The song came out slurred and slow. Jack Frost danced slower. One arm snapped off, and his head dented inwards. Blood smeared across his white body. Adrenaline surged through Paul's veins, reminding him of how it felt to be a young man. He became aware of his battle cry as he fought the mauled lunatic out of his home. With the noseless man wobbling on the threshold, Paul landed a kick into the guy's gut. "And stay out!" he roared. The man went sprawling backwards over the Reyes' front steps. He clattered into a heap at the foot of their driveway. At the top of the driveway staggered a group of people. 2 men and 4 women. Each had various ghastly wounds, like the noseless assailant. A cheek torn open here, an eye gouged out there. Intestines spilt out of one woman's belly and trailed behind her like a bridal train. Across his small patch of lawn in front of the lounge windows, a woman with one arm shambled towards him. Paul's nerves turned to liquid, and his legs to jelly. He whimpered and felt his bladder threaten to release. He scrambled for the door, missed, found the handle, and slammed it shut. With shaking hands, he slid the chain back across, his fingers slaked with gore. "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," he whispered to himself. Immediately, the door began to bang again. and so did the windows looking into the lounge. And the screams from the back of the house continued, high-pitched and terrified. Goose flesh rippled up all over Paul's body. These nutcases had surrounded the house. He had no idea what they wanted, but he guessed it wasn't a cup of cocoa. He pushed off from the vibrating door and strode towards the sound of the commotion. He brandished his decoration/weapon. Rose, in the kitchen, some of the attackers had smashed their way through the windows. The glass sliced their forearms to ribbons, but they didn't care. They were trying to pull Rose out by her hair. She shrieked and kicked and batted at the hands to no avail. Several of their guests stood by and watched, their faces drawn in a rictus of shock. They still held their alcoholic beverages. Sean from next door had gone white, and his beer was tipping and spilling on the kitchen tiles. Paul froze. Rose had always argued about getting double glazing, but he'd deferred. He now wished he'd listened to his wife. How long until the front windows, looking out onto the lawn, shattered under the strain? He slapped himself across the face and raced into the fray, swinging Frosty for all his worth. He smacked at the hands that snaked through the glass over and over and over again. "Get off my wife, you damn hooligans!" That broke the paralysis spell over the others. The kitchen became a flurry of activity as people dropped drinks and grabbed a hold of Rose. Gail Clark yanked on Rose's feet, pulling her back into the house. In his vest and tie combo, Sean lobbed his pint glass through the window with a violent yell. The claws clutching Rose weakened enough for her to break away. Rosemary collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She held her hands to the blotchy red patches of yanked-out hair. Paul's mind was a flurrying snowstorm of thought. He stood in the kitchen, chest heaving. He stared out at the people gathered in his back garden. "Zombies," he said, not quite believing himself. "They're goddamn zombies." The swaying figures closed in on the house. Bangs and clangs echoed from the front. The dim winter light faded as the bodies blocked out the windows. They moaned in a chorus of the dead, their bloodied hands slapping against the four walls. Someone asked, "What do we do, Paul?" I don't," a woman screeched. "They're coming down the fireplace." An ice shard speared through Paul's core, and the world seemed to slow. "Sweet baby Jesus," he mumbled. An enormous thud shook the foundations of the house. The survivors staggered to the walls for support. Paul shook his head clear. He tightened his grip on Frosty and ran for the lounge. He skidded to a halt as a cloud of coal dust settled across the room, coating the furniture and the tree. The hell? The smog cleared to reveal a massive man in a red and white suit. He kneeled, fists on either side, like the Terminator from that Schwarzenegger flick. A large brown sack slung over his shoulder. He had heavy-duty black boots, and a Santa hat clung to his head. Paul's insides shriveled. He'd fought off the one at the door because they'd been roughly the same size. But this one? No chance. He tried to speak, but found that all the spit had evaporated from his mouth. Only a tiny mouse-like squeak came from his vocal cords. The giant looked up. His eyes sparkled above two rosy cheeks. The orbs looked normal. No cataractic whiteness, narrowing to a black pinprick. A big, thick, white, bushy beard sprouted from his face. Paul dropped the damaged Frosty, which bounced to the laminate wooden floor. His head spun like he'd taken a right hook to the dome. "Santa?" Paul whimpered. Santa smiled, but the smile was fleeting. "Yes, Paul, it is me. Do not be afraid." He glanced at the window, which showed the growing horde pressing against it. "But you should be afraid of those naughty boys and girls." Paul's heart hammered high up in his chest, like a hummingbird trapped in his torso. His brain kept rifling through facts and thoughts as if to make sense of it all. His old thinker kept coming up short. It threw its cards in the air and searched through the rubble again. "What?" He licked his lips. "What do we do?" Santa grinned and stood up. He was 8 feet tall and towered over Paul and the others. If he were any taller, he wouldn't be able to stand upright in this house. He chuckled a deep, throaty laugh. "Ho, ho, ho." It rumbled through the earth like a bear's growl. Santa unslung his sack and upended it onto the living room floor. Machetes, blades, baseball bats, cricket bats, axes and chainsaws, swords and knives, flamethrowers and guns, even a grenade, and armor. It looked like police riot gear, except it had the symbol of a snowflake. "I have brought you well-behaved children, some toys to play with." Paul regained some of his lost nerve at the sight of the armory. With this elf-like giant on their side, they could turn the tides of battle. He bent down and picked up a chainsaw. "Groovy," Santa bowed. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a few 100,000 more homes to equip for the coming siege." Out beyond the front window, a reindeer with a red nose was fighting off zombies with its antlers. It was winning. Paul felt like someone had punched the wind out of him. His eyes darted from Santa to the fireplace. "You mean you won't stay? Won't stay and fight? We won't last without you. I am afraid there are others who need me." Santa raised one gloved finger. "Remember, Paul, jealousy and greed are very naughty." He gestured to the treasure hoard on the ground. "I brought you these because you have all been good. Let us keep it that way. Will you at least tell us why this is happening? Santa narrowed his eyes. When there is no more room in ho-ho hell, the dead will walk the earth. And with that, he vanished back up the chimney in the blink of an eye. In the background, the glass front window started to crack. A lightning bolt fault line zigzagged. Paul revved the chainsaw and beckoned his friends and family. Let's do this. Everyone, arm yourselves. Rose, stay behind me. Put some armor on. Gail picked up a spear and donned a helmet. She pulled up alongside Paul and jabbed at the air between them and the fracturing window. A flurry of movement in the distance showed that Rudolph was still fending off the zombies. Gail screeched. Jesus is the only zombie we allow this time of year. Paul took the lead and strode forward, chainsaw in front like a jouster. Sean drew alongside with a shotgun. He pumped it, and 2 red shells bounced to the Reyes' rug. Sean had a steely look in his eyes that Paul had never seen before. He didn't even know the man could handle a gun. The only thing we should be eaten is turkey. The window gave way, and the zombies flooded in. Paul raised the growling chainsaw and went to battle. Rest in peace on Earth. Cabin fever. Then the storm broke and was replaced the next morning with a frozen 1880s blue sky. The kind when after the clouds clear, the world shuts down with a blinding but heartless sun. No wind and dead quiet. Jason and Bill huddled around the cabin's only wood burner. Above them, the pine timbers groaned and complained with the weight of the storm's snow, over 20 feet on the roof. But what dropped their stomach into a mine shaft was the sharp crack about every 10 minutes, a sound like a double barrel going off in the rafters. The cold clenched down on the roof beams. The cabin held in a merciless, ice-cold fist. It was not unknown for a collapsed cabin to be found in the spring, the dead still frozen under the rubble, a beast with a blood-froze beard. Bill mumbled out loud to himself, feeding logs to the wood burner. He'd almost lost Jason the night before. The storm outside had been ghost white and howling a blow. He had worried Jason would lose the rope he'd strung to the outhouse, 60 feet from the cabin. He knew from experience, men lose their way, only to be found in the spring thaw. So when Jason had slammed the pine door and come back in, shaking and terrified, saying he barely made it back, and talking about his lungs seared out from the cold, he had sighed in relief. But when he'd calmed down later, Jason said, "There's something out there, Bill. I could feel it looking at me. I swear I saw eyes in the dark, red eyes, and a growl." Provisions were low, so for supper, the only meal that day, Bill dished out steaming black beans, only a sourdough biscuit on the side. Bill, chicken. Bill, they called him, liked to talk when he was serving food, and fancied himself a philosopher, a cowboy philosopher, although his ranching days were well over. He was 50, which is old in the mountains, but a lot about Bill was still adventurous with his red kerchief, leather chaps he wore like skin, and his Stetson, which he rarely took off. As he dished out the food, he declared, "The Shoshone have 100 words for snow, Jason. Snow that grows out of the ground. A hoary frost sparkling with tiny ice fingers reaching for the sun. Snow that forms a crust when the top melts some and then freezes back up, which might break your leg in a post hole. And snow that lives in the worst cold and wraps itself in the body of a wolf and steals your soul. Like now. Bill, it's 60 below, and I don't feel much like talking about the cold." "I understand, son," Bill said, and took Jason's empty tin plate away. Later that night, Bill sat by the burner, the flame reflected on his weathered face, high cheekbones, and full lips. A handsome man, his wife had said. He stroked the scar from the edge of his eye to the back of his chin. A scuffle with Texas rough Civil War vets in '72, calling him half-breed in the street. "But I know this cold is different," he thought. "It's tougher with Jason." The fire held his eyes on the yellow-blue flame for a long while, the wood humming and spitting, the smoke smelling of pine sap. "Did you swear you wouldn't take on caring about another?" he asked himself. "Did you?" "Yes. After the sickness, I did. And now you're caring about this Jason. And that's why you're scared? You're getting odd." Bill kept feeding the fire, but couldn't help thinking about death. For him, a white wolf in his dreams, with a blooded snout, a red-eyed beast scratching to get in. The next morning, the Olson party beat on the door. Finding the cabin must have taken some luck. Dick Olson, his wife Martha, their daughter Susan, and their young boy, Joey. They filled the cabin once inside. Mr. Olson was near done. Living with his feet black from the frostbite, he could still hobble, but Bill had him put one foot in cold water. It began bleeding, and he wrapped it up. Jason asked Bill about the feet in the kitchen, and Bill talked low, so the party wouldn't hear. You can tell from his sagging eyes the West has whipped him, Jason. If you notice, his eyeballs are skittering like a mare beat too much. Once broke like that, too broke, a horse won't come back to anything worth working. Mr. Olson has the no blinks, and I've seen it in the mines. You best stay clear when you run up on a man like that. Next thing you know, you'll be staring too far away yourself. Their daughter, Susan, did not have the no blinks, Jason thought. Just with a sneak peek, he could see she was the most beautiful creature he'd ever put eyes on. Once she unwrapped from the weather, Her long hair alone shone like some kind of goddess, he guessed. The blonde let loose, soft and shimmering. She made him think of a gazelle he saw once up in the high country. It stood with its white belly and golden hide, then ran off as light as air. The god's creature moved like grace itself, but Susan, just sitting there, was better. No, sir. You cannot chance more than a sneak peek when you run into a sight like that. He kept his eyes on the burner and was glad when the Olsen party carved out a private area off to the side, blankets making a wall of sorts. Bill made some supper for all 6, including himself. The last of the salt ham, hardtack, and black beans. Everyone silent around the pine table. Bill didn't talk much around strangers at first. Some said likely due to him being a half-Bannock Indian. But once the diners settled in, the boy Joey couldn't get enough and threw questions at Bill like a scattergun. How long you been up here? Why do they call you Chicken Bill? And where'd you get that scar on your cheek? Bill gave short answers, but his eyes smiled talking to the boy. He explained the Galena cabin was the way station for the Stanley to Ketchum route, an overnight midpoint on the 60-mile run. Jason was a postal officer and would ski the 60 miles on 8-foot board skis, the trail too narrow for a wagon and too steep for a horse. Jason listened in, but also knew Bill had lost both his wife and son to cholera and sparked up around children. The boy asked, "Why don't you wear a gun?" Bill said, "I'm done with guns, young man. Guns mostly don't ever work out like you expect." Joey's eyes grew into silver dollars. "Did you ever kill anybody?" The table went quiet, and Bill said, "Excuse me. Jason and I have to clean up. Come on, Jason." As he rose, his eyes were glistening, and Jason remembered Bill didn't like to talk about guns and killing. Bill and Jason were in the kitchen when Mr. Olsen came limping in. He was dodging around like he had something to say, but couldn't. Finally, he said, "Joe's mother feels... Well, don't talk to our son, she says." Bill said, "Sure, no problem." He took a deep breath and let it out. "You'll always be an outsider, looked at as an outcast by your own people, a savage Indian by the other." Jason felt bad for Bill, but the truth was, he thought there was nothing he could do about it anyway. The next day, the Dawson brothers pounded on the door. After coming in, they spread out like it was natural to position themselves for a gunfight. The one in the middle was Cliff, the oldest brother. He scanned the room, his eyes not missing a thing, running over Jason and Bill like bacon, greasy fingers, assessing if they were a threat. He then stopped on Mrs. Olsen. "You get lost out of Pocatello? Standing me up in Ketchum seem right to you?" Slumped down at the table like a man giving up, Mr. Olsen stared at his foot wrapped in the bloody rag. He glanced at his wife, but she saddled up to Cliff, put her face close to his, and with a sweet voice Jason hadn't heard before, brushed her lips up against his right ear. "I'd come back for you, Cliff. You know that." Cliff shoved her off rough and put his head back and laughed. A mean sound, more coyote bark than laugh. He said, "I guess I know when I been had, you viper." He nodded to Mr. Olson at the table. "Sorry, Dick. You can have her back now." Mrs. Olson shot a look at her husband. He was slumped at the table, his hands shaking while covering his face, his elbows on the yellow pine planks. The smaller brother came out from behind the blankets. He threw a black carpet bag down on the floor. Cliff kneeled and opened it up. The bag was full of money, bundles of cash. Mr. Olson looked up. His eyes misted, yellow-red. "Our future Martha, you wanted Oregon. There it lies. You didn't count on the snow." And looking at his feet, "Much less this damn freeze." Grabbing the bloody rag off his dead foot, he threw it at his wife, which she knocked away just before it hit her face. Mrs. Olson hesitated, then lunged toward her husband, her eyes harsh, her face tight. With a harsh whisper, she spit each word like venom. "Yes, the storm, and the damn freeze, you fool. You're an old fool, the worst kind. You know that? You only see what you want." Mr. Olson glared back at her, but she stared him down. Cliff packed up the bag and threw it to the third brother near the window, then turned to Mrs. Olson. He pointed his gloved finger at her and narrowed his eyes, laughing through his sneer. "It's true. He don't see you, Martha, but I do." And then he cocked his face at Mr. Olson like he remembered something. "But being Indian agent at Pocatello has its advantages for you and Martha, don't it, Dick? I guess the tribes will miss it none, not knowing it was theirs to begin with." Mr. Olson reared up at the table, wincing when he stood on his bare black foot. His face twisted up like being covered with fire. He stumbled out a derringer from his inside vest pocket and aimed it at Cliff. But Cliff was fast, quick with his gun. In the tight cabin, the shot rang out like the screaming wrath of God. Mr. Olson, thrown near off both feet, his back smacking hard against the pine wall, with his chest a bloody hole, he slid to the floor, and his boy Joey ran to the body, and Susan held her brother. The son, daughter, and dead man lying together. The Dawson men soon grouped everyone to the side of the cabin, while one brother held a gun. They searched for weapons and collected both the derringer and a shotgun found in the kitchen. The smaller brother filled a sack with the remaining food. Mrs. Olson grabbed Cliff's arm, holding him from turning away, and said, "Please forgive me, baby." Cliff threw her off and laughed, shoving her toward the table. Leaning into the table, Mrs. Olson stayed dead still as she stared at the wall. Cliff, behind her, spoke firm, like he wanted the pain to sink in. "You ain't worth much, hardly worth feeding Martha, but I'll be taking you, the boy, and especially Susan up north to the renegades. They'll make use of you in the camps, but your daughter and boy Martha, they'll bring prime dollar." Mrs. Olson's hands gripped white on the table. The other two brothers drew their guns after hearing Cliff. In a short time, Jason and Bill stood at the cabin door, while mounted up in front of them in the bright sun and the dry pine air were the three brothers, but also Mrs. Olson, the boy Joey, and Susan on the last remaining horses, all tied to saddle horns. The Dawson brothers turned and broke trail, the snow pushing up above the horses' bellies, the hooves rising high to punch through the clean white, the pine hanging heavy with fresh snow. They were soon out of sight. Without a word, Bill pushed through the deep snow to the shed. He dragged the door open, hitting it with his shoulder, finally making his way in. After the sound of rummaging, he came out. Strapped on his side was a Colt .45 rig, low on his hip, outlaw style. He said, "I got the weapon, but not the means. We need a horse, Jason." The shed door was still open, and Jason stuck his head in. "You're right, we don't have a horse. I've got an idea, though, for something else." Jason and Bill took 2 pairs of board skis and pushed through the snow 100 yards to the top of Galena Ridge. The near cliff fell off the side of the mountain. If they could ski it, and Jason couldn't guess how, but if they could, they'd cut off the Dawsons 2 miles away, where they came out the bottom of the switchbacks. They had to take the chance. Jason strapped both himself and Bill into the skis where they needed to drop off. Bill stared off the edge, wide-eyed. He grabbed Jason's arm, nervous as all get out. Jason had never seen him panicked like that, gaping over the edge like a little boy. He choked it out. "I need to tell you. I could had your postman job, Jason, but it required me to ski. Turned it down, and hell. That's why they started calling me Chicken Bill." Jason laughed to look at him. "Hell yourself, Bill. No chicken about it. It ain't nothing," he lied. "Let's go." They pushed off. The skis fell through air, and Jason sidestepped to turn as he hit the bank. The snow flowed like a heaven's mist over their heads, Jason's skis swooping back and forth, a fine curve on the fresh snow, the cold flakes stinging his face. They weren't skiing, but flying. Bill just closed his eyes and took a straight shot. Together, They leveled out on the basin. The riders slowly came out of the trees. The horses were struggling to lift their hooves in the deep snow, tired and pushed too hard. The younger brother was the first to notice Bill standing 50 yards ahead. Jason could tell Cliff, then saw Bill also, and was moving in position, turning side saddle so he could draw. As Cliff angled, Bill crouched in the snow. And when the two brothers pulled their sidearms, Bill drew in response, his gun light in his hand, like he was flicking his finger. He knocked the two younger brothers off their horses like nothing, ducks in a chute. Bill then took aim at Cliff with both hands, holding the revolver for the distance, but stopped. Mrs. Olson's horse crossed the path. The more Bill moved to get an aim, the more Mrs. Olson got in the way. Shoot, damn it. Just shoot. Bill blew air, exasperated. He raised his gun straight up and fired into the sky. This was the break Cliff was looking for. He leaned out, drew on Bill, and took him down with a blast of 3 shots. Cliff could shoot. Bill fell in front of Jason in the cold. As death approached, Bill didn't feel scared, but settled. A peace came over him. But you're leaving Jason, he thought. You need to tell him before you go. Leaning close, Jason said, "What, Bill? What is it?" He knew Bill was dying. You can do it, Jason. You're a far better man than you think, son. Bill then closed his eyes. A warmth moved over Jason that he couldn't explain. He suddenly realized Bill was the closest thing to a father he'd ever had, and it was right then. Jason knew he was done with can't do anything about it anyway, and it was right then he was done with the holding back, and he had to try. Feeling the heavy weight of the cold steel Colt in his hand, he stood up slowly and held the weapon down by his side. Cliff flanked him, staying side-saddled, with a broad grin on his face in the bright cold, moving to get the sun behind him. "Give it a try, boy," he said, and holstered his weapon. "When you're ready." And he angled his horse as he moved, his hand hovering on the gun handle. Jason lifted his arm, and Cliff's gun exploded in his hand. Jason never saw him draw. He was so fast. The slug hit him in the shoulder and threw Jason's aim. He fell to the ground, and Cliff was soon above him, dismounted, and kicking the Colt away. Jason looked down Cliff's gun barrel and felt his chest pounding. He knew the bullet was coming, and his only thought was hoping it didn't hurt. A quick ending, a snarling cut the cold air before Jason saw a white-shaped animal leap for Cliff, who fought the snapping jaws while he writhed on the snow, holding the white, wolf-like thing off his face. Cliff then screamed in terror. The animal slashed at him and dug in, ripping his throat out, then stuck its snout into the wound. Jason turned away, thinking he was next, but soon caught sight of the wolf flashing in the trees. An albino, pure white. He lost sight of the animal in the green pine, the needles covered in ice, crystals on the trees, every last drop. I enter Red Square from the south side. It's late. There's no one else around. My footfalls echo across the bricks. Then I spot him, a slender figure beneath one of the cherry trees outside Drake Hall. Silvery white hair pulled back in a ponytail. Black gloves, combat boots, a wool trench coat, the preferred attire of all psychopaths. I reach into my purse. In the next instant, he is standing right beside me. "Excuse me, miss." I pepper spray him in the face. He takes it stoically, with little more than a wince. I empty the entire can, but he just stands there, squinching like it's nothing but tepid water. Then he wipes his obsidian eyes clean with his gloved fingertips. I suppose I deserve that. I forget how fast we seem to you. Forgive me. I mean no harm. I will scream. You're Anika Chande, yes? From the physics department? Doctor, I say by reflex, sounding breathless. Who are you? Or what? Dr. Chande, forgive me, he repeats, extending a hand. My name is Sasha Volkov. I've read your books and all the papers you've published. Your work with photons is nothing short of brilliant. No pun intended. Thank you, I say flatly. I don't believe in auras, but if I did, his would be ice cold. I decline his handshake. I don't want my blood to crystallize in my veins. I'm hoping you will help me, he continues. You are perhaps the only one who can. I don't think so. His pencil-thin eyebrows pin together. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. You don't warp 15 yards across a plaza in the blink of an eye, demonstrate a superhuman immunity to capsaicin, and then ask for a favor. I see you're sporting a nice pair of fangs as well. That's very cute. Am I being punked? No, ma'am. He pulls a handkerchief out of his coat and mops his face with it. Although I have been told I look like Slavic Ashton Kutcher. I'm calling the campus police. Please, hear me out. Look, I'll show you. He walks into a beam of moonlight and vanishes. Not entirely. His outfit is still visible, but there's no one inside it. I start to deliver on my promise to scream, but the sound catches in my throat. The ludicrousness of the sight, the sheer improbability. I must be suffering a psychotic break from the stress of finals, or the sushi I had for lunch is causing hallucinations, makes me scoff and start laughing instead. Very impressive. Bravo. You see, the trench coat says, gloves raised in a gesture of helplessness. Somewhere along the way, Our species developed this ability or disability, depending on your point of view, to disappear under direct light. That's why we're nocturnal. You might assume this gives us a natural predatory advantage, but it's actually incredibly frustrating. Imagine trying to eat a sandwich without being able to see your hands, and it's painful. The stronger the light, the more intense the discomfort. Is that why you live in Seattle? I snort. Because the sun is never out? Yes, exactly. Makes sense. I have a hunch. There may be some sort of interference at the quantum level between our body's atoms and solar photons. That's why we have no reflection and can't be captured on film. But the human mind can't abide the irrationality, so by rote, it forms a composite to make us appear whole. He returns to the shadows and rematerializes. A fancy illusion, just smoke and mirrors. Nothing to see here. No need for an anchor to drop into my stomach, or the hairs on the back of my neck to stand up. Nature had to find some way of keeping us in check, or we would have rendered you extinct by now. What do you want? I ask, wishing my voice didn't make me sound so fragile, so human. There was an article about you in the school newsletter recently. Thanks to a generous donation from someone who wished to remain anonymous, your lab was able to get a new quantum camera and an entangled photon detector. Volkov grins, his cobra-like fangs glistening even in the dark. I am that mysterious benefactor, and I want you to take my picture. Please stop messing with me. This really isn't funny at all. I'm quite serious, actually. We use simple objects for quantum imaging, like an emblem made out of gold and silicon. Not living beings. Well, according to your lore, I'm not really alive. Isn't that right? I grip the strap of my purse, certain at any moment I'm going to wake up in a puddle of my own drool at my desk, having fallen into a fever dream. Undead beings, then. The fact remains. You injure me, Doctor. I am not a zombie or a virus. My physiology is nearly identical to yours, with a few notable differences, of course. His stare is beyond unsettling. I cast my gaze towards the parking lot and keep it there in case he's trying to hypnotize me. It's very late. I need to be getting home to my family. He pretends not to hear me and carries on. I understand there may be challenges. That's why I'm asking you. You're the only one who can rise to the task. Mr. Volkov, whomever or whatever you are, I suggest you learn to take no for an answer. The first time, not the second or third or fourth. I stride away, making sure to keep my head held high, projecting indifference. Oh, come now, he says, voice dropping to an impossibly low pitch. I could just compel you to do it, but I'd rather you choose. This is an exciting opportunity for us both. My legs grow heavy. against my will? How is he doing that? I stop in my tracks, my heartbeat rising rapidly into my throat. A mysterious gravity pulls me back in his direction, like my subconscious has staged a coup. I swallow against the growing certainty that this is actually happening. Only a monster would fail to see the false dichotomy of his proposal. All right then. Fine. In the lab, I keep the overhead lights off. The light from the monitors will have to suffice. As soon as we're inside, Volkov makes a beeline for the oversized Faraday cage one of my students built as part of her thesis. Like he knew it would be here, waiting for him. "What material is this lined with?" he asks through the open door. "Aluminum foil." "Ah, why? Worried it was silver?" The muscles of his jaw twitch. "No, that's another myth. Along with aversion to the crucifix, garlic, and wooden stakes. Nothing but superstitious nonsense, which, if I'm honest, I find rather insulting." "I see. It's going to take a while to get everything prepared." "I can wait," I hear him say. Except his lips didn't move. Much like your ascetic monks, we are capable of remaining motionless for protracted periods of time. Even when speaking into my mind, he sounds like a robot. "Stop that. I don't like it. It's invasive. Forgive me," he says for the millionth time. But at least it's out loud. I set to work calibrating the laser with the beam splitter. Then ensure the quantum camera is in position to catch all the action. Once the photons pass through the vacuum chamber and into the Faraday cage, they will entangle with Volkov's atoms. Or won't, if there is indeed some sort of interference. Then the beam will be rejoined on the other side by a sensor. The high-precision spectrometer, along with the computer program on my laptop, will gather and interpret the data. You do understand that should we manage to get an image, it's going to be little more than a ghostly outline, right? Nothing like an actual photograph. When was the last time you saw your reflection, Doctor? In the bathroom, after class. I've never seen myself at all. Not in the surface of a lake, nor the glint of an eye, nor a darkened pane of glass. You cannot cast a shadow if you are never in the sun. I've commissioned sketches and paintings, of course, but it isn't the same, is it? I've never seen a real, tangible image of Sasha Volkov. He pauses. Because he's so still, I can't tell if he's battling with something or just going dormant. Can you imagine how that feels? To have so little confirmation of your very existence? I mean, I teach for a living. I shrug. I wonder how many people he's fed on. How many pints of blood he's drank. Thousands, he says, reading my thoughts again. Why is that relevant? I asked you not to do that. I can't help it. It's like asking me to ignore a blaring car alarm. If you want my help, then you can try. He doesn't move. Yet I feel his irritation growing, as though he's funneling his feelings directly into me. How many animals have you consumed in your lifetime? How many cows, chickens, fish? I'm vegan. Have been since 2006. Figured you would know that. The point is, you don't think of your food in those terms. Would you castigate a lion for feasting on a lamb? It is the way of things. We have been with you since the beginning, in the shade of your monuments, co-evolving. Nature designed us for a singular purpose, to cull the human herd. But as you can see, we're doing a piss-poor job of it. There's more of you than ever. In a surprising, potentially deceptive twist, I feel his emotions sink into self-pity, like he believes, ultimately, it is he who is the victim. Aren't your kind just humans who've been bitten and turned? Like Lestat and Lewis, his irritation blooms into full-blown disgust. Ridiculous. Can you turn a chimpanzee into a Homo sapiens? We reproduce the same way you mammals do, via fornication and pregnancy. We are warm-blooded, after all. It's just not our blood. It doesn't originate from our bone marrow. His anger cools a few degrees, and he adds, I have never been human, but I have lived. I have seen wonders and horrors you cannot begin to fathom. We have our own society, tucked away in the nooks and crannies of yours. Our own ambitions, too. Glad for the change of subject, I announce. We are ready to run our first trial. Please stop talking now and remain stationary. Volkov shuts the door and settles in. I click on the laser. The beam is split and sent into the cage. The hum of the machinery comforts me, brings to mind the many students who've used it to embark on their first voyage into the realm of the subatomic. The inevitable look of rapture when they finally see the particles they've spent so long reading about. In the midst of this rumination, I realize it's providing a kind of psychic cover. My subject is occupied, the grip of his influence weakened. I slip a ballpoint pen into the pocket of my blazer and pray he doesn't notice. We run 6 trials in total. The whole process takes a little over 2 hours. Once it's finished, I take a screenshot of the results and send it to the printer in my office. Volkov exits the cage and joins me, and once it's printed, I hand him the copy. He accepts it like it's his birth certificate. Like I said, pretty grainy, but it worked, he murmurs. His fingers trace over the grayscale form, caressing it. He is totally transfixed. I feel his heady mixture of elation and awe, the vanity that coils around his heart like a serpent. It's me, he whispers. You got what you came for. I need to get going now. My family will be worried. Volkov gives me the side eye. Surely you know by now that lying to me is pointless. I don't know what you mean. If I don't get home soon, you live alone, Doctor. Have since your breakup with Paul. You don't own any pets. nothing that depends on you for its survival, not so much as a cactus. Your younger sister calls to check up on you every so often, but not often enough. He sounds bored with the subject, preferring to pore over the printout with the intensity of an art appraiser. Is there anything else your system picked up on? I push aside the sense of betrayal and shake my head. The emissions analysis produced a string of errors that would seem to confirm your hypothesis of some kind of interference, as no entanglement occurred in any of the 6 runs. But it would take a much more thorough experiment to isolate the actual cause of that interference. I see, he says, licking his chops. No matter. Still a tremendous success. Unable to help myself, I blurt out, "Are you going to kill me now?" He blanches. He's probably manipulating me, but I can feel the sting of hurt feelings in his chest. Of course not, Doctor. You have me all wrong. He clutches the printout in both hands and peers around the lab, taking it all in. I want you to study me further. Enlist the help of others, if need be. People we can trust to test my DNA and take blood samples. Think about it. If we can produce more results like this, you can publish them. These findings will fundamentally alter the world's understanding of biology and quantum mechanics. And what might that do for your career? When I don't say anything, he continues, it's time Homo sapiens learned they are not so alone as they imagine. It is time for us to evolve beyond the predator/prey dynamic and work together. We have to do something before your species gets us all killed with your utter disregard for the health of this planet. His eyes land on me. Despite his orders, I feel sick to my stomach, because in his zeal, he's accidentally let slide a few of his memories. I see his first kill at just 4 years old, hunting with his father in the streets of Quebec. The elderly homeless man bundled up in a doorway, the pale, mottled flesh of his throat, the profound hunger, 1,000 times stronger than any I've ever experienced, an insatiable need. The man awakens and finds himself immobilized by Volkov's father. Fear pours out of him in a thick stench. His final thoughts are filled with deep regret. He's struggled so hard for so long, endured so much, and survived on so little, only to meet his end as some night creature's meal. And little Volkov loves it. Every drop of remorse, every pitiable whimper, every dream. He feeds on them along with the blood, gorges on the man's life force until he's full as a tick. And his father says simply, "Good." I see his most recent kill from earlier in the night. Stephanie Albright, the student who made the Faraday cage. He broke into her dorm and drained her in her sleep. She died and never saw it coming. Volkov looks at me now, He knows that I know. Don't, he warns. I jam the ballpoint pen into his chest. My aim is perfect. It lodges between the ribs slightly, to the left of his sternum, and hits something hard, catching when he takes a breath. He growls at me. I told you that wouldn't work. Then I'm soaring through the air. My body collides with the quantum camera, shattering it against the wall. I land in a heap on the floor, sparks raining down around me. Pain shoots up my spine, the wind knocked out of me. Volkov is on top of me in seconds, his weight like a 1,000-ton hydraulic press. There is no further possibility of fighting back. Do it then, I hiss at him. I will not be like the man in the streets. I will not go to my death without dignity. If he's going to eat me, let him taste nothing but pure hatred. Do it, you fucking parasite. He flinches again. I feel his emotions fan out in a kaleidoscope of rage, disappointment, and woe, beneath which is a childlike longing for my approval. He can't hide it now that I've seen it. His need for recognition that washes over me in waves. It's nearly as overwhelming as his hunger, an insecurity born of being raised with no mother. We could have done important work together, he says, voice choked with repudiation. Remember that. Then he's gone. His presence peels away like a bad dream. The overhead lights turn on. Dr. Chande? Asks Officer Thompson. He's standing in the doorway, holding a nightstick. The school won't let him carry a gun. Everything okay in here? Shakily, I get to my feet and survey the damage to the lab. Other than the broken camera, all the equipment is intact. There's no sign Volkov was ever here, except for the image on my laptop. I'm okay, officer, I say, but we need to send the local police to Stephanie Albright's dorm room. There's been a homicide. Gripping his stick closer, Thompson asks, "How do you know that?" I stare at the screen, its spray pattern of photons in a vaguely humanoid shape. The world's first evidence of the supernatural. But it could be anything. No better than a UFO sighting or a blurry photograph of Bigfoot in the woods. I clear my throat and glance at the officer. In the wake of Volkov's influence, my emotions come flooding back with a vengeance. Hot tears spill down my face. I clear my throat and remind myself, no matter what I experience, I am a scientist. Call it a hunch, returning Marie. Now, before I say anything else, I just need to establish that I am not mad. I have every reason to be mad, but I'm not. I'm not mad. I've never been less mad than I am right now, even though I have every reason to be madder than I've ever been in my life. To the best of my recollection, you were not working here when I came in on Sunday. I'm sure I would remember somebody with as many piercings as you, especially with you being such a young lady and all. I'm sure I would have made some sort of comment about how you don't have a wedding ring on your finger. And that's probably due to all those cartoons you've chosen to imprint upon yourself. No. When I came in here on Sunday, there was a rather old man working behind the counter. I told him I was looking for a rug because my mother-in-law is coming to town, and whenever she comes over, she expects me to put out all the gifts she's gotten me over the years. 18 years of marriage, and she expects to see everything she's ever bought as though my home is some sort of Daphne Rubite Museum. That's her name. Daphne Rubite. She tells me it's Latin, but who knows? The woman lies about everything. Why should her name be any different? Anyway, she got me a rug for Christmas last year, and it was so hideous that I kept it outside in the shed. But when I sent my husband, Griff, to go fetch it so we could display the awful thing, he said, it appeared somebody had broken into the shed and stolen it. Do you believe that? Somebody actually wanted that disgusting rug so much they committed a crime in order to have it. Not that there's much in that shed worth anything, but even the bags of dirt would have been a better choice. My word, I came in here on Sunday because I was looking for a rug that appeared similar to the ugly rug that was stolen. But despite this, allegedly, being an antique store, you do not sell rugs here. I believe I filed a formal complaint in that little suggestion box you have at the front, but I haven't heard any response yet. We can circle back to that later. When I expressed my disappointment to the old man working here at the counter, he offered to give me a discount on what he described as a rather interesting mirror. He went into the back of the store and came back with the item. I found it to be a bit too ornate for my taste. It was imitation gold, and the glass had several scratches on it. I told the old man that a discount would not suffice for a damaged object, but that I would accept it as a gift from the store, since I found it so unprofessional of him not to offer unattractive rugs. He took a moment, looked at the mirror, and then agreed to give it to me, gratis. The old man did not put up much of a fight, and I suppose I should have taken that as a sign that something was amiss. When I got the mirror home, I had absolutely no desire to ever look at it again. The only reason I took it was because I never turned down a deal, and there is no better deal than free. I decided to deposit it in my daughter's room. Riva is 15, and as such, she believes she has impeccable taste, when in fact, she has no taste whatsoever. She was quite stunned when I showed her the mirror. It's unusual for me to give her gifts, even on her birthday, when I usually donate money to a charity in her name. She took to the mirror immediately, and Griff did his best to hang it in her room, without putting holes in every wall. Finally, he managed to erect it by her closet. And then we all went about our day in preparation for the arrival of Queen Daphne. Almost immediately, things began to go wrong. I noticed that suddenly all the photographs around the house had been altered. I had no idea how it was happening, but the heads of everyone in the photos were gone. Simply gone. I thought it might be some sort of prank, but neither my husband nor my daughter are all that funny. When I mentioned the occurrence at dinner that night, Riva confessed to me that she believed her mirror was haunted. Not just haunted, mind you, but haunted by the ghost of Marie Antoinette. I would have chalked the whole thing up to a teenager's imagination. But my daughter is the least imaginative person you've ever met in your life. Deciding to investigate myself, I marched straight up to her room and planted myself in front of that mirror. Sure enough, after only a moment or two, there she was, Reine de France, herself. She had her head, but there was a minor scar around her neck, and she was holding the most adorable little dog. My French is spotty, since I haven't spoken it since college, when I spent a semester abroad in Paris, smoking cigarettes and ordering hamburgers at French cafes. I managed to work out that the mirror given to me was once owned by Marie's great-great-granddaughter, and she had taken up residence in it since she found heaven to be rather dull. She was the one who changed all the photos, and she said she planned on committing even more mischief for as long as she was in my house, unless I donated her to a museum where she belonged. Well, if that stuck-up monarch thought I was going to relinquish my own property simply to avoid a little poltergeisting, she was sadly mistaken. I told Marie that she was now a guest in my home and would act accordingly, or I would see to it that her mirror was placed in the shed where some petty thieves might abscond with it, the same way they had with the revolting rug my mother-in-law had purchased for me. I was so invested in intimidating a dead Frenchwoman that I didn't even hear the front door open. Daphne had entered our house without knocking, shocker, and came right upstairs to greet Riva, because her granddaughter is the only person she actually cares to see. She arrived just in time to hear me relay to Marie the story of the stolen rug, and she was none too pleased. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, holding the most vile candelabra I've ever laid my eyes on. "Well," she huffed, "would you care to throw this in the shed as well?" Truth be told, that's exactly what I wanted to do with it. Over the next few days, I couldn't tell you who irritated me more, my mother-in-law or the ghost of Marie Antoinette. While Daphne did her standard passive-aggressive commentary on everything from my fashion choices. A woman your age wearing skirts? How brave. To how I raise my child. Would one birthday gift a year really be that bad? Marie preferred to be a bit more whimsical in her torment. The house was constantly filled with smoke, for no reason at all. It wasn't until I located the source of the smoke that I realized our oven was on high, and there was a cake burning inside of it. It might be true that she never actually uttered the phrase about letting servants have their pastry, but that's no reason to waste perfectly good food. I have no idea how she even put the cakes together in the first place, since we normally order takeout and keep absolutely nothing in our pantries. Another tidbit Daphne likes to use against me when she visits. "No sugar," she'll squawk. What kind of a household has no sugar? A skinny household. That's what I feel like saying, but I never do. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought the two of them were conspiring against me in my own home. Daphne blamed Marie when all my skincare products were suddenly smeared all over the bathroom walls. But I can't believe anyone that rich would willfully waste La Mer. Marie was definitely responsible for what was going on with Riva. However, my daughter suddenly began acting out. She was shouting about bourgeoisie and escargot and something about a pot de chambre. It took me a day or so, but then I understood that Marie was trying to possess the girl in order to have an even more effective way of terrorizing everyone in the household. Griff was no help at all during all of this, by the way. He loves the History Channel, so for him, this was all wildly entertaining. It wasn't until Riva began taking 5 baths a day and demanding that I feed her bonbons that I decided enough was enough. My plan was to take the mirror out to the shed and smash it into 1,000 pieces. But I remember seeing an old horror film where destroying the haunted item caused the specter to permanently embed itself in the home. The last thing I needed was my daughter walking around like royalty until leaving for whatever community college we'd be sending her off to. I waited until earlier today, when Daphne and Riva were sitting on the couch with a cheese plate watching Les Miserables. And then I tore up to Riva's room and grabbed the mirror. I had to be careful coming down the stairs with it. But luckily for me, they were engrossed in the scene where the revolutionaries were being slaughtered. "Brilliant," I heard Marie exclaim in French. "I just love a good comedy." Somehow, all by myself, I managed to get this ghastly mirror into my car and drive it all the way back here. Now, I would like to return it. I would like an apology. I would like 3 free items from this store, all of which I will be choosing. I would also like an assurance that the old man who gave me the mirror is fired. What do you mean you don't have any old man working here? He was very distinct looking. He had bifocals, salt and pepper hair, and his left ear was a bit lower than his right. Surely you must know him, the owner, all right? Fine. So he's the owner. I still want him fired. What's that? When? 10 years ago? And how? A car accident? My. Well, that's what I get for not asking for a receipt. Sales pitch. Molly pushed open the door of the conference room. It was a loud, heavy, metal one that left her fingers smelling of dust. She brushed them on her colorful leggings. The conference room wasn't well lit, but it was in a cheap motel on the side of the highway, so Molly hadn't expected much. It smelled of stale coffee and sugary pastries that were piled like faux gold on the table pressed against one wall. Sadie turned and smiled at her. The women embraced each other. "Thanks for coming out, beautiful," exclaimed Sadie. Molly nodded back, her eyebrows slightly raised at the memory of her husband, asking why she was bothering to come at all. She had explained that Sadie did help them move in, and she was always inviting her to things. But Molly always declined, and it was just preposterous. And the kids had sleepovers, so they were occupied and he had stopped listening. "I was happy to," said Molly. She released Sadie from her hug, but found that she held on. Awkwardly, Molly attempted to rewrap her arms around Sadie's long, thin body. That girl just never seemed to gain any weight. Sadie chuckled a bit and gestured at the pastries and coffee. "Coffee at 9 p.m., Sadie?" teased Molly. "I thought people liked coffee," protested Sadie. "We do. It's just a bit late, don't you think?" said Molly as she approached the table. "Sadie? Don't you think?" She repeated her question. "Sadie?" Molly spun around, but found her friend had walked off to the computer. She shrugged and snagged herself a cup, but the burnt smell put her off a bit. She grabbed a cherry Danish and a napkin before taking a seat on one of the black plastic chairs. "Oh," exclaimed Sadie. "Oh, sweetie, could you please sit in that chair?" She indicated the chair on the end of the row at the right-hand side, instead of in the middle where she could clearly see the presentation. "Sorry, babe. It's just, more gals are comin', so..." She let her O drag out uncomfortably and pursed her lips, and then smiled at Molly, who was scrambling with her pastry and purse. "Who else is coming?" asked Molly. Sadie spun on her heel. "What? Who else is coming?" repeated Molly as she settled into her new chair. "Oh, some gals from the book club, I hope, and some friends of mine." Her words trailed off. Molly began throwing her hair into a bun, an old habit she had when she got nervous. She tried to be polite and asked, "Do I know any of these friends?" "No, doll, but you'll love 'em, I promise," said Sadie as she marched over to Molly. "God, I do love that dress with those leggings. Just so cute. Perfect for fall," she added, pointing with a polished red nail at the brightly covered leaves that dotted her friend's legs. Sadie grabbed a napkin. She dusted off the chair Molly was just in. Molly, for her part, opened up her mouth to protest that she wasn't dirty when another guest burst through the door. It was quite clear to Molly that Sadie knew this girl better than her because they squealed at the exact same decibel. Molly overheard Sadie mention something about work. At that word, Molly frowned. She remembered work. She remembered lunch with friends, gossip in the break room, and feeling like she was actually contributing to something. Of course, that was all before motherhood. Molly rolled her eyes to keep from crying and raised her pastry to her lips. A few tantalizing flakes fell off, but when she went to bite down, she found the treat rock hard. Disgusted, she removed it from her eye line and wrapped it up in the napkin. She sniffed her coffee warily, but found a similar level of grossness at the sight of shiny oil circles catching in the light flickering above her head. Molly sighed, longing for her warm bed and beloved husband's soft protests at random news articles that flashed by on the silent TV. She noted Sadie's new friend was permitted to sit in the middle and that the woman didn't take a single snack or cup of tar. But hey, it wasn't like she was missing out. She was rail thin, just like Sadie. Perhaps she was part of the same spin class. A calendar without extracurricular for the kids certainly has more time. Molly sighed. A few more women entered. They came in pairs like on Noah's Ark. 2 women in all black dresses. 2 women in bright leggings that sent a bolt of envy up Molly's spine. 2 women in fur coats who didn't greet Sadie, but joined the first woman with bright red hair in the middle. Sadie kept looking at the door and checking her watch. At exactly 9:15, Sadie flicked the lights off and wobbled to the front in her high heels. The presentation had started. "Welcome, beautiful souls," flashed up on the screen. The words were decorated with pretty pink sparkles and brightly lit up the room. "Thank you for joining me so late tonight, my darlings. But as you know, I didn't want a single excuse about work running late." She clapped her hands together, and it echoed around the room. The side chatter stopped. "I want to talk to you about an exciting opportunity that has just changed my life for the better," began Sadie. She looked like a creepy ghost behind the bright light of the presentation. Molly suddenly felt very cold. "Before I get into the nitty-gritty details, I want to share all of the perks that this lifestyle has given me," said Sadie. She flashed the next screen, where bullet points began to zoom into focus as she read them out. "It has given me eternal youth, a low-calorie diet, which is totally customizable, incredible investment opportunities, and lifelong friendships." Suddenly, the door burst open. In walked 2 women, clearly late to the party. But Molly was relieved because their hair was in messy ponytails. They looked around the room and mumbled apologies. She thought she noticed a fruit pouch from the same brand she purchased sticking out of one woman's person. Sadie directed them to the chairs next to Molly, with a sour look on her face. Molly eagerly made room for the women. Sadie cleared her throat. Now that all of our guests have managed to arrive, she paused for dramatic effect, her gaze barreling down at Molly's row. We can continue the presentation. Molly's eyebrows furrowed with concern as she heard the words of her husband echoing back at her that this whole night was a bad idea because she didn't even know these women. But she missed the community of her old city. They had picnics in the park with the kids, a carpool schedule, neighborhood block parties. Of course, that was before it all fell apart. How can you get these opportunities and more, you may ask? Sadie's bright voice brought Molly back to the present, but got real screechy at the end of that question. Molly felt a cold shiver run down her back. It starts with me. My name is Sadie Malone. Sadie clicked the next slide, and a beautiful professional photo of Sadie in a power suit beneath a weeping willow appeared. And I have been involved with this group for, well, Sadie let out a giggle. Centuries. She flashed a winning smile and clicked to the next slide, which showed an edge of an acrylic painting of her flashed on screen. She was dressed in a medieval gown. The artist had captured the beauty of the very same tree from the previous slide, only smaller. Sadie seemed the same exact age. Her skin was less smooth, but the artist still captured it, creamy color against the backdrop of the rushing river. Molly listened for the sound of bird chirping, insects as they flew past her ear. It was as if she traveled back in time. The piece felt familiar, and she placed it as one she had seen during a visit to the art museum. A sense of dread began to fill her. Yep, that's me. Can you believe it? She asked. Sadie seemed to grow taller as she leaned into the audience. It's like I haven't aged a day, and neither will you if you choose to join our 3-step program. Her voice seemed to echo in Molly's ears. She felt herself growing tired and colder with each passing second. She readjusted her position in the chair and pinched herself to stay awake. The next slide showed a photo of Sadie embracing a woman in a side hug. This is BB, said Sadie. She looks kinda sad, doesn't she? Sadie's clicker turned into a single red laser dot, which darted over the woman's frumpy dress, unappealing limp hair, and sad teeth. Well, after 1 month with me, she went from this, Sadie clicked to the next slide, to this. Before them was a bright photo of a drop-dead gorgeous model who Molly swore she recognized from a red carpet or two. She wore a long, red ball gown. Her hair was curled into beautiful waves, and her smile was now white as bone. Now, I will warn you ladies that if you don't follow every step of this program, Deadly consequences await you. Sadie's voice seemed to drop an octave, and the image of BB faded. Molly felt Sadie's icy blue eyes lasering into her. It felt like everyone left the room except the two of them. She felt safe and warm in her friend's gaze. The cold of the conference room had melted away, giving into the promise of eternal youth. I can't sleep, can't give in, mumbled Molly under her breath. If I sleep, I'll die, she continued, and gripped the cheap plastic chair with all her might. But I know you gorgeous, gorgeous gals aren't dumb enough to not listen to me, right? Exclaimed Sadie. The spell was broken. BB was back to being bright, as was Sadie's tone. Now for the nitty-gritty, darlings. And I want you to know, I'm only sharing this opportunity with you because I just feel so close to all of you, she said, as she clutched her hands into a fist around her heart. There were soft murmurings of agreement. The first step to this whole thing is to let me bite you. Sadie's voice had a tinge of glee at the very end. No, seriously, ladies, I'm not joking. I summoned you because I just think y'all will make the very best vampires in the whole gosh dang world. Because when I bite you, you pledge your undying loyalty and servitude to me, your BFF. And after that, you can host vampire parties of your very own. So you, too, can create your own vampire communities. Isn't that great? Then she used that icy gaze again. The world faded around Molly, and she was left in the embrace of her friend's warm spell as she said, "Just remember, you'll always be a part of mine, and loyalty to me always comes first. Best friends for life." Molly sat stunned in her chair. Her heartbeat pounded like in the movies. Sweat formed on her neck and dripped down her body. She felt like a child who had put too many blankets on the bed too early in the fall. It was just so hot. And Sadie had the solution. Sadie could cool her down. Sadie could fix her. She blinked her heavy eyelids a few times. Her face was fully relaxed. Subconsciously, her hand drifted to her neck. She felt it drift up her face, pull back, and slap her cheek as hard as it could. It was a technique her father had taught her as part of her driving lessons. Suddenly, as the room came back into view, something inside her screamed at her to run. Grab her purse and run. But it was like her legs couldn't or wouldn't move. Instead, she found herself staring at the presentation before her. Like zombies, the women beside her began to stand and join the line in front of Sadie. It was a horrible, perverse version of communion. Desperately, Molly looked around for the exit, but the darkness around her made it quite the challenge. She reached down for her purse, coffee, and pastry. Slowly, she stood up, suddenly thankful Sadie had forced her into the aisle seat. Molly was careful not to turn her back and was slightly transfixed at the sight of Sadie pulling the women in closer around herself. She seemed to be whispering soft words as she stroked one woman's long, red hair. Molly inched past the final row of chairs, careful to have it between her and the group of hypnotized victims. She used one hand to feel behind her, looking for the edge of the pastry table, but she backed in too quickly, and the table hit the wall. All eyes turned to Molly. "Ah!" screamed Molly. She decided at that moment to turn her back and look for the door. She sensed that the mob had turned and began to stumble over the chairs, reaching for her, grabbing at her. Their arms and hands were like vines. Molly searched her memory desperately as she replayed the night. She had moved chairs. She had been at the center. She had gotten a pastry and coffee. But which one had been closer to the door? Sadie's voice rang high above the moans of her servants. "Molly, Molly, come back, Molly. Please, won't you be the best vampire babe in the world? The coffee." The coffee had been closest to the door, so Molly turned herself around again and was face to face with the girl with red hair. Her eyes were glazed over. Her mouth hung open, and she was blocking Molly's path. As the other women began to draw closer to them, Molly scrambled with what to do. She felt a bit of coffee slosh over her hand, so she threw that in the girl's face. When she remained unfazed, Molly threw her pastry at the woman. This seemed to stun her, so she grabbed more pastries. Each one hit like the rocks they were, and slowly the stranger stumbled back. Molly bolted to the coffee, but was greeted by the pair of women in black dresses. They smiled at her, holding their hands out like friends. Their fangs glistened despite the lack of light. Molly smiled sweetly back, just so she could open the top of the silver carafe and push the coffee over. The women wailed in agony as burning hot coffee poured out. Molly found her door and pushed with all her might into an empty hotel hallway. She ran past the bewildered guests and the bored concierge. She considered telling them to call the cops, but knew from experience no one would believe her anyway. The burst of cold night air filled Molly with adrenaline. She pushed the alarm button on her car and ran to it. In the safety of her vehicle, she locked all the doors. She let out a guttural sob. "I just want friends," she wailed into the night. After a few moments, instinct kicked in and threw the car in reverse to get her home. James was asleep when Molly returned. She was shocked to find it was after midnight. She double, triple checked all the lights were on, and the doors were locked. So were the windows. As she approached the bed, She reached beneath her husband's pillow and wrapped cold fingers are the wooden stake. Then, her excuses. Dead body wrapped itself in the warmth of her husband and attempted to fall asleep to the rhythmic sound of his beating heart. Morning came and went. The work week came and went. By the following Saturday, the nightmares of the last week felt like a scary dream. Of course, that's when the letter came. It didn't come by postman or dropped off at work. It was nailed to Molly's front door one night when she got home from work. The letter's envelope wasn't like the normal white one you find at the office. The paper was rough and slightly yellowed, like when her son, Jake, had a school project, so they soaked paper in coffee to make it look old. And when Molly flipped it to the front, it bore a pretty, pink, sparkly seal with the letter S on it. Her husband told her, wait for him to open it. So after the kids went to bed, they sat up in theirs and slowly broke the seal. Inside was a sheet of paper which had Sadie's beautiful calligraphy that matched Molly's original invite to the conference. The message was short and sweet. I really think you should reconsider, babe, for your family's sake. Call me. S. Molly crumpled up the letter. You gotta admit, it's a new tactic. They usually just invite us over for a BBQ and a few cheap beers, James said with a laugh. Then, realizing his wife wasn't laughing with him, he added, guess it's time to move again. Molly remained quiet. A few tears gathered in her eyes. James once again tried to lighten the mood. You think one of them would figure out I'm a descendant of the Van Helsings before inviting you over? Maybe that's why they keep trying. Like some sick cat and mouse game, she replied, her voice trembling. Then, with a frown on her face, she added, I just wish I could find some real friends. He offered her a warm embrace, much more comforting than last night, as he whispered into her hair, someday you will, I promise. James was wise enough to let her pull away. She marched into James's home office. He couldn't see her eyes, and turned on the shredder. It roared to life, grinding the letter into tiny pieces of confetti.